What's shaking, folks? Back with another reaction. Back at long last with some more Freiheit. Which is to say, I think the last Freiheit reaction I did, which was the end of the first album I went through, was in like the fall of 2023, so it's been like a year and a half. In fact, in the moment, I'm forgetting who shared the Freiheit material with me, so whoever that is, I do apologize, but I was going through, just checking for deep dives that had been off for a while, scrolling through my music folder, and it occurs to me that I have 2 additional albums of theirs, which I'm remembering they have albums in both German and English, so this is the English version of Fantasy 1988. So again, I'm looking forward to reconnecting to this, and I know there were people who said, I do have a recollection, that some of the songs maybe don't translate into English as efficiently as others, and perhaps the meaning is distorted. I've certainly been hearing about that a bit with the Nena material as I've gone through It's All in the Game, and in fact the last reaction I did, I learned that the song has very different lyrics in English than in German. So I'm guessing that's the case with Freiheit. Nevertheless, the first track on this album, Fantasy, as I said, 1988, is Keeping the Dream Alive. So, yeah, it's a phrase that you often hear in relation to something which might be improbable, which might be unlikely to ever obtain or to manifest, but for which there is still some value, even if only to the person who is keeping that dream alive. I saw that, Luca. I saw you. Which is to say, they could in fact be alone in their perception that the dream is worth keeping alive, but there is some value in that to them. And of course it could be an external perception, the idea that, well, maybe they're frustrated, maybe there's a fatigue, but they are continuing to keep the dream alive, and that means something, that holds some value. So yes, it seems on the surface to suggest a process, a commitment, an activity that has not yet yielded its greatest potential in terms of results or outcomes, but for which someone, or a group of people, or an institution... Luca, what are you doing? You're not helping. I really don't want to have to interrupt or start this video over, but I do feel she is especially mischievous at this time. But yes, for which there is still value or importance to continuing to persisting on the path despite not knowing what this may mean in the long run. I do think I'm gonna... Okay. We'll see if we get through this video. I'm not convinced. In any case, this is Freiheit. The track is Keeping the Dream Alive, and it's the first tune on the English version of their album Fantasy from 1988. Sounds like a fantasy.
Tonight the rain is falling, full of memories of people and places, and while the past is calling in my fantasy, I remember their faces. The hopes we had were much too high, way out of reach, but we have to try. The game will never be over, because we're keeping the dream alive. I hear myself recalling things you said to me the night it all started, and still the rain is falling, makes me feel the way I felt when we parted. The hopes we had were much too high,
expected, but it wasn't that. It wasn't a song that started almost like a barbershop quartet, like throwback doo-wop type of vocal performance, then became, well, actually, at the very beginning, it did have a bit of a score fantasy, like the beginning of a Disney fantasy animation, and then it went into, again, this throwback mid 20th century singing group type of feel, and then we had some orchestral hits and some score with percussion type of stylings, though fair to say, also with a synth bass and maybe a bit of guitar that did speak to an 80s sound, and then culminating in what felt like the ending scene of a fantasy movie where, despite some peril, despite some potential danger, everything fell back into place and we got a happy ending. And lyrically, it seems like there is something to that, and it sounds like not only was some of my intro relevant, but the idea that they did maybe set the bar too high at first, and perhaps we're hoping for something that is ultimately always going to be hard to reach. But it also sounds like they're saying, don't let that ruin what this means, and don't let the dream die, because it's worth keeping that pursuit. And in fact, not everything has to happen all at once. It doesn't have to magically become the thing that we hoped. Everything can happen one by one, all in good time, and maybe, even if it still seems like it might be asking too much, the hope and the dream staying alive, keeping alive, is worthwhile and valuable, and who knows, maybe the best of situations could still obtain, even if that's somehow distinct from what we thought in the beginning. So there's a realism, an honest appraisal of the exciting, heady feelings, and I think we even get reference to, when you first said this to me at the beginning, maybe I thought and expected too much, but maybe in the end, if we keep the dream alive, and if we understand that it will be a process and not everything can take place all at one time, there's something to this still, and it's worthwhile to keep going on the path. So it seems optimistic. It seems like something that would work in a 80s fantasy type of movie, and I was surprised by the vocal stylings, even if, again, some of the sonics along the way did speak to an 80s sound. There was, again, a synth bass moment that really stuck out, and then the guitar and maybe the what I assume is like an orchestra hit on a keyboard that did feel very much of the time. But either way, a really surprising tune, and one that I was not prepared for. Now, again, I only went through one other album, and not knowing their larger catalog, it may very well be something within their normal range, or something that they've done in other songs, other albums. But yes, whatever I was expecting, it wasn't this. Nice to get back to this deep dive. Once again, shout out to the person who shared Freiheit with me. I apologize it's been so long, but as I said, I've been trying to catch up on deep dives that fell by the wayside, or that I forgot about as I tried to expand all the different things I do on the channel. And that's not to say that this won't happen in further cases, not necessarily with this deep dive. Now that it's back on my radar, I should be able to keep it at least semi-regular, but there's surely some other deep dives that did the same thing. Indeed, in the moment I'm already thinking of one or two that my plan is to get back to, so yes, bear with me. I can only do what this brain will allow, and sometimes the brain is a bit leaky, but I did enjoy that. I found that to be a surprising and vocally and sonically compelling tune, as well as an inspirational track if you take a sympathetic view to being optimistic even when maybe you shouldn't be. So yes, let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.